Hi everyone. So I thought I would go over two recent reads that I read. The first one is, this one is not a romance. I'll just say that. It's probably more of a teen book. It is on like Amazon as like more teen type of book. So this one here is called Meet the Outcasts by Dylan Colon, I think it is. This one here is a very emotional read. This one is not for the faint of heart. I would say like this here is more, this here is more targeted, definitely towards teens, for anybody who goes through depression, anxiety, if you self-harm, if you're thinking of possible self-deletion, you feel like an outcast, you feel like a loner, you don't really have anybody to talk to. I feel like this is a good book. It's mainly going to be a series. It's not that long, pretty quick read, but it's definitely something that I feel like could help some teens out there if they are having these types of feelings, that it's good to talk to somebody about the things that you're, feeling and thinking. This is something that I was never told when I was a teenager. Back in the 90s, seems like a long time ago. Back in the 90s, we really didn't discuss mental health and all that stuff. It was basically like, suck it up and deal, In today's time, we can't really suck it up and deal. We have to talk about the things that are going on inside our head, Also, I do feel like a lot of mental illness has to do with family trauma. There are people who go through not so good childhoods. I have heard stories of all kinds of stuff, all kinds of abuses, whether it's child abuse or sexual wise, different things like that. I'm lucky that I never, my parent, I would say I was definitely more of like, if you want to go and classify a movie that I think still is relevant today, The Breakfast Club. Look back at The Breakfast Club. You see a class of different types of people. You see the basket case, Allison. You see the princess, Claire. You see the criminal, John Bender. You see Brian, who's the brain. And then you see Andrew, who's the jock. Those are all stereotypes. Those are all the typical stereotypes that you see in today's world. But what's something they all have in common? They're all dealing with parental issues. You have Andrew that is getting pressure from his old man to gotta be tough, you gotta go and win these games and all this other stuff. And the emotional trauma that Andrew is going through to perform, to be, tough, don't want to admit your feelings, otherwise you're classified as a wussy kind of thing. you know, you got to be a man kind of thing. You know, there's that typical stereotype, you know, for men, like you got to be a man, can't like admit your feelings. If you do, you're a pussy kind of thing, you know. So Andrew, you know, always has to be tough, always has to win, win, win. And you have parents who kind of push that onto their children, you know, to do sports, and you have to be a winner. You can't be a loser. And it put all this pressure on Andrew to perform. Then you have the other side of, you have Brian, who's really smart, but you have his parents who are putting him under all this pressure, like you can't get a B, you have to maintain like a really high GPA, otherwise you're never going to go to college. So there's all these pressures that these teenagers feel, you know. Claire is dealing with a parent's divorce, you know, and the fact that she has two parents who are basically vying for her attention. You know, you have her parents who are basically telling her, well, I'll buy you this if you like me more. Oh, I've seen that with parents. It's like, oh, I'll buy your love. It doesn't work like that. Then you have Allison, who her parents ignore her. She gets ignored. So she does these outrageous things in order to get this attention from herself. And then you've got John Bender, who his father physically abuses him. His father's a piece of crap. You know, and it's like, no wonder John acts the way he does, because look at the environment that he grew up in. And yes, the other parents that, you know, Allison deals with, Claire deals with, Brian deals with, you know, those other ones, they may not be physical abusers as John Bender's father is, but you clearly can see that they're psychologically abusing their children and not realizing the harm that they're inflicting on them. So I kind of thought of this book in a sense of like The Breakfast Club. You have these different types of people who come together with this common interest, you know. They all come from broken homes, you know. And what I thought was really great, this is why to this day, no matter what people will say, I do think that John Hughes was a great director for his time back in the 80s and 90s. Great director with the, you know, with The Breakfast Club right there, because he showed no matter where you come from in life, we all have the same types of problems, you know. And I the one scene I really loved in that movie was, besides the shenanigans and all the stuff that they did, you know, together, like they formed this great bond that Saturday. But also what I really loved about that movie too was the fact that, two things I would say. One is, the principal knew nothing of them. He prejudged them as like, oh, these kids are this way, and oh, I don't want these kids having to take care of me. You know, basically saying like, you know, this crop of generation. And then it's like, the principal is not realizing, it's like, look, I'm sure the generation that came before you probably thought the same thing about you. So, you know, every generation has their issues. And we all deal with generational trauma. That's something that we all deal with. We're all dealing with generational trauma. So you have these parents that aren't listening to their kids. They can't identify with their child, so they aren't listening, you know. Meantime, these kids are going through a lot of stuff. So it's the same thing with this book. You've got different characters. You've got the character of Corey that is dealing with depression. He's dealing with anxiety. He's more of an introvert. He's definitely more of a goth kind of kid, and he's getting the he's dealing with bullying, so he gets transferred to this other school, and he befriends Vic, and Vic is dealing with his own emotional issues. You've got parents in this book that are neglectful in the way of like mentally checking out, and I definitely say, for me, I identify a bit with this book myself, because I had a parent who mentally checked out when I was a teenager, and it sucked. And for me, I'm still dealing with the fallout of that. Even 20 years from now, I'm still dealing with the emotional fallout to that. And, you've got this friendship that forms between Vic and Corey. And I tell you, all it takes is one person to take you out of that darkness. If that's all you're feeling right now is that dark space, and you don't know what to do, you don't know how to handle this turmoil that's kind of going on in your head, all it takes is just one person to really get you out of that mindset. And I feel like Vic really helped Corey in this book. They became friends. And then you have these characters of Eli and Becca, and their boyfriend and girlfriend, and they're dealing with their own issues. Eli, I definitely would say, was an emotional manipulator to Becca. And Becca dealing with her parents, and her mom, since her mom was a single mom, dealing with her mom's verbal abuse and psychological abuse. So it was a very deep book, and it really got me very emotional reading it. There were several times that I was just openly bawling my eyes out, because I identified with it, especially as a teenager. I was like in my head screaming, I feel seen, so it definitely was very emotional. But I also think of it as a way of it's hope. And this is where I think a lot of us, if we've dealt with emotional trauma as a teenager and we've overcome it, we didn't check out early, we didn't self-delete, we have dealt with our monsters in our head and still deal with them to this day. It's not something that ever goes away. But I think, for me, I feel like those monsters, even though they're still in your head, you can get to a place where you can cage them up and they can't get out. They can still whisper stuff to you in your ear and try to play games with you, but ultimately you're the one that's in charge. So for me, I feel like this is a good book, as I wish I had as a teenager, because I think it would have really made me feel better. But I think this would be a good book for people like today, teenagers, young adults, just dealing with their own emotional trauma. And it's something that it's nobody really addresses, is that every generation deals with some type of emotional trauma, whether it comes from our parents or people we thought were our friends, whatever have you. It seems like us as human beings, all we know how to do is tear each other down. And for me, I've been there so many times that I can't do that to people, because I know what it's like to be down on the ground, you know, have life beat you to your knees, you know. But you can choose to either be a victim and let life keep you on your knees, or you can be a survivor and you can stand up and you can learn to fight back. You know, and I don't mean with your fists, I mean with your brain, with your noodle. So for me, you know, it's a very emotional book, but I did really enjoy it. For as much as it was putting me through a lot of emotional memories from my past, it was really good. It was really good. I don't want to go in too much, because then I'm going to tell the whole story. And there is other books that are going to be involved with this, and I would love to read them, because I thought this book was really, really well done, and I ended up giving it 5 stars because I thought it was done really well, especially in the perspective of, like, this person knows what it's like, you know, where some people, there's some people out there in the world who, they like to fake mental illness, fake, I don't know why you would, honestly. Mental illness is not a game, and it's not something that you should fake. If you do not have anything going on with you in your head, you don't want to fake that. You know? Because not only does it piss us off, the ones who deal with that every day, deal with, you know, mental illness, but also it hurts mental health. It really does. Because you see these people, these actors on TikTok, who fake mental illnesses for attention. And it really just, I don't know about anybody else, but it pisses me off. And I don't like seeing it. And I really wish that there would be more stuff done about it, you know, like getting these people deplatformed. You know, when you find out this person's faking it, you know, you delete their account, because they're not helping. Even though I don't agree with censorship, I think there definitely needs to be something done about that sort of thing, because you ultimately you harm the community that are trying to help themselves. They're trying to get themselves out of that grave that they dug themselves in, you know, with their mental illness. So yeah, it frustrates me when I see something like that, and I get really pissed off. So it's like, believe me, I wish that I didn't have the mental illnesses that I do. I wish I didn't have depression. I wish I didn't have anxiety. I wish it was something that I would never have to go through any day, you know. All of a sudden it just comes in, you know, just like that. And I have to work through it. So for me, when you see people who are clearly faking something, it just, you know, angers me, because it's like, this is humans. This is what humans do to each other. We hurt each other. Whether it's intentional or not, we hurt each other. We need to be helping each other more. You know, giving each other a hand. This is how I feel like this book here, I feel like it's giving someone a helping hand. It's helping somebody. So yeah, anyways, not to keep going on, because it's like, you know, gonna take forever with this video. I try to shorten my stuff, but it ends up being like super long. So, the next book I ended up reading was Juliette Cross's Bright Like Wildfire. So we got the characters of Betty and Bennett. Now, this was more emotional than I was anticipating. It was steamy, for sure. It had some really nice steamy scenes in it, and I really enjoyed it. And I did give this 5 stars. But this was another one where I was not expecting the emotions that I got from this. It definitely dealt with, again, family trauma, you know? I was not expecting that in this book. It's definitely dealing with family trauma. You got 2 sides of the spectrum. You've got one character that has dealt with parental abandonment. And then you have, on the other side of the coin, you have a parent that keeps putting pressure to have their child, which is an adult, you know, having their child be an overachiever kind of thing. And, oh, you need to do it this way and all that stuff. So you've got both of these adults who have dealt with their fathers, as sad as it is, both, you know, dealing with fatherly issues. And then Betty comes back to her hometown, and she goes and she sees Bennett, and Bennett had just recently opened up his own grocery store, you know, kind of like a Trader Joe's or Whole Foods. And so he's dealing with like all the stress of that. There also is a content warning in here for anxiety. So anybody who deals with anxiety, it is told in here. It's kind of more light, but it is discussed in here. So you got Bennett, who's dealing with, you know, a lot of stress and of opening up a new business and trying to keep it, you know, successful and all that stuff. So his way to de-stress from that all is he likes to do plays. Plays is something that makes him like happy. And so he ends up joining this play for Barefoot in the Park. And so Betty goes and she joins the play too. And so the director's like, well, you know what? I'm going to make you the couple, the married couple. And so at first, like, Bennett's kind of like, okay, because he likes her. You know, he's liked Betty for years and thought she was attractive, even when they were like, you know, younger. And Betty doesn't like him because when they did a play years ago, he accidentally glitter bombed her boobs. So, so there was that. And, so she had this kind of like hate toward him, but it didn't last very long because once he was like, hey, if you're still mad about that whole glitter bombing your boob thing, I'm sorry. It was a joke, you know? So he kind of like showed her like, hey, I'm interested in you. I'm attracted to you. Let's see where this goes. So it's like them, while they're rehearsing their lines, they're starting to fall for each other. But as I said before, you also are dealing with like this underlying issues of parents, you know. The moms were good, you know, you've got the mothers that were very supportive of their children, but then, you know, you're dealing with fathers. The one is not in the picture at all, so Betty definitely has some type of like daddy issues, and that kind of comes to play later on in the book. But other than those kind of like, you know, deeper issues with the book, I really enjoyed it. You know, I loved the banter between the characters, of them kind of like going back and forth with each other, discussing and stuff like that. It really wasn't much of a hate to love. It had a slight hate to love to it because she really was like, F this guy at the beginning, but like the more she got to know him, the more she was like, I prejudged him. And that was the thing that she definitely had to kind of like overcome, is the fact that she did prejudge him based on like his money, because his father had like money, had built up this business. And so Bennett never really had to like obviously struggle, where her mother was a single mom, you know, for years. So there's like kind of like the two sides of the coin. And again, kind of reminds me of like the Breakfast Club, where you have different points of how a person lives, and knowing that, wow, both of these characters dealt with issues, dealt with parental issues. So yeah, I mean, it's weird how both of those books I read around the same time, that both had to deal with parental issues, you know. It definitely was more than what I was anticipating. But I still enjoyed Bright Like Wildfire, but it was more emotional than I was anticipating it. I was, you know, it was small town romance. Definitely, you have characters that are kind of like into more normal jobs. I mean, he owns like this specialty grocery store, but he's a grocery store owner. You know, it's not like he's a CEO or something, you know. And then she was a teacher, and a very empathetic and caring teacher. So I enjoyed that. This here, it says it's book 1 of 1. I'm hoping that the author decides to change her mind, because there were secondary characters in the book that I really would love to see them have their own stories. One of them is Hal, Bennett's brother. That dude was funny. He made me laugh. He had like where he could cook really well, because I guess like his grandfather was really good with cooking, so that he would hang around with his grandfather to learn how to cook. I love that I love that aspect to family, like teaching your children or grandchildren, you know, like maybe family recipes and things like that. That aspect to family I like. It's the emotional trauma that's the problem. So I liked that aspect. There was Hale learned from his grandfather. And the grandfather I loved. I thought the grandfather was awesome. It's the dad that was, frustrating. So, I liked that. I really would like to see Hale get a love story. And then Betty was working with this woman named Lily at the school, and Lily seemed really cool. She was more newer to town, and I wanted to see her have like a romance, possibly with Hale, you never know. And then Betty had this friend, Finn, and Finn is, her gay friend, and so he was hilarious, because there was a scene in the book where they had he had won some type of giveaway thing where he could go and to the grocery store, and they're teaching you how to cook these sauces and meals and things like that. So clearly Finn saw that Bennett kept staring at Betty. And so Finn's thinking in his head, I'm going to go and play games with this guy's head. So Finn goes and puts his arms around Betty from behind, and she's kind of looking at him like, what are you doing, you dork? What are you doing? And so he's kissing her on the cheek or whatever it is, and just being looks really lovey-dovey. And so she looks over and she sees Bennett is not happy. And so she's like, you didn't, kind of I can't believe you did that, And so when Bennett comes up to Betty, you know, and he's like, oh, so who's this, like, you know, kind of thing. And Betty's like, he's gay. He is gay. You know, like she's like really, you know, really laying it on there. Like he is totally gay. And so I thought it was hilarious. I just started busting up laughing. And I was like, oh, girl, you're trying too hard. I just loved Finn. I thought he was fantastic. And I'm like, man, I want to see him have a, you know, love story. So those are the books that I've read. Like I said, more emotional than I was anticipating. And not realizing that there was going to be like definitely some family issues, you know. Usually there are, to some extent, when it comes to romances, you know. Usually I find there are a lot of, I don't know if maybe the parent, you know, like the authors have problems with their parents and that's where they put them in the stories. But I find a lot of romances where you have like these parents that are just like out to lunch. And I'm like, really? You can't be there for your kids and be happy for them? So yeah. I've run across like so many romances where it's like the parents are fucked up, you know, just like, I'm just like, wow, I do not want to be a parent like that. I do not want to parent my children like that. Oh, yeah. But anyways, not to keep going on, but that's what I've read so far. And, I'm hoping I can do a vlog soon, so we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. But yeah, that's it for this video here. Have yourselves a good day. Take care of yourselves. Be kind to each other. Be safe out there. And I will see you all on the next video. All right. Bye.